They're getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
Search for Nancy Guthrie.
There were 3 deputies at Annie Guthrie's house last night. They were inside for 3 hours. They had equipment. They were taking photographs, moving through different rooms. When they came out, blue gloves on their hands. They got into their cars and drove away without saying a single word. That happened the same night Savannah Guthrie released a video saying the family would pay. Before a single fact in this video lands the way it should, you need to understand something about Savannah Guthrie. This is a woman who has anchored national broadcasts through presidential elections, Supreme Court rulings, and global crises without losing her composure once. She is a Harvard Law graduate who understands precisely what words do inside a legal and investigative context. And since the night her mother vanished, now she has said almost nothing publicly. Not because she has nothing to say, because what she knows and who she suspects cannot be said by her. It has to come from law enforcement first. Until that moment arrives, she is communicating the only way she can. Through silence, through deliberate gestures, through the specific warmth she shows one person and the careful distance she maintains from another. This video is a translation of that silence. On January 31st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, heart condition, limited mobility, dependent on daily medication, took an Uber to her eldest daughter, Annie's home in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson, Arizona. She arrived at 5:32 in the afternoon for a Saturday dinner and game night. She left after 9 o'clock. She never made it back to her own life. Annie is the child who lives in Tucson. Annie is the child whose home Nancy visited regularly. Annie is the child who knew her mother was coming that evening, knew when she would be leaving, and knew that when it ended, Nancy would be returning alone to a house 4 miles away with no caregiver and no one who would notice anything before Sunday morning church. That is operationally complete knowledge. The kind of precise current knowledge that a targeted abduction requires before a single step can be planned. Not guessed, not gathered from a distance. Known. Law enforcement understood that immediately. From the earliest days of this investigation, federal agents did not canvass Annie's neighborhood once and move on. They came back. Multiple return visits to the same street, the same doors, the same neighbors, asking about the same windows of time. Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Kafender noted publicly that the neighborhood had been canvassed twice and said a properly executed canvass should not require a repeat pass unless new information kept pointing investigators back to the same location. Agencies under resource pressure do not revisit the same residential block multiple times without a specific evidentiary thread pulling them there each time. They were not running out of other leads. The evidence kept directing them back to this one. Savannah knows what that means. She has said nothing about it publicly. Not one word. When dinner ended and Nancy needed to get home, Annie was there. The drive was 4 miles. Nancy is 84 with a serious heart condition. By any ordinary reading of how that evening should end, the daughter whose house it is drives her elderly mother home. And that did not happen. Tommaso Chioni, Annie's husband, was the one who drove Nancy. He put her in his car, took the 4-mile route to her house, pulled into her garage, and walked her inside. The garage door opened at 9:48 and closed at 9:50. That was the last confirmed moment anyone outside the immediate family saw Nancy Guthrie. There are innocent explanations, Tommaso offered. Annie was tired. Investigators are not paid to dismiss those explanations, but they are required to ask what that arrangement structurally accomplished. It placed Tommaso, not Annie, as the final person with Nancy. It gave him direct observation of her entry point, her transition from a family evening into solitude. The exact moment the window opened. If anyone in that household had prior knowledge of what was coming 4 hours later, the decision about who drove Nancy home is not a small domestic detail. It is an architectural choice. 3 days after Nancy was reported missing, a vehicle connected to Annie and Tommaso's household was towed into evidence. The Pima County Sheriff subsequently released a statement clearing the entire Guthrie family as suspects. Definitive language, victims, not suspects. That statement was issued, and as of mid-March 2026, more than 6 weeks after Nancy disappeared, that car has still not been returned. A former SWAT commander asked publicly why. The family is cleared. So, why does a cleared family still not have their vehicle? Sheriff Nanos partially answered in People magazine. He said investigators took their phones, their computers, processed their vehicles, processed their homes. Processed means full forensic workflow, GPS history, cell proximity data, movement logs, trace materials that can place a person in a specific location at a specific time. 6 weeks on a vehicle belonging to a cleared family is not administrative delay. It means something in that car is still alive, still part of an active investigative thread, still too important to hand back. On February 4th, among the agents who arrived at Annie and Tommaso's home, one wore a shirt bearing the letters ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Agents trained specifically in encrypted communications and extracting data from devices their owners believed were permanently protected. That agent was carrying a Celebrite forensic extraction device. Celebrite bypasses encryption. It recovers deleted messages. It surfaces content the device's owner was certain was gone forever. You do not bring that instrument to a family's home without a specific device already in mind. The Pima County Sheriff responded carefully, saying the acronym on the shirt is not indicative of a particular crime. They did not deny the agent was there. They did not deny the device was used. On March 2nd, 1 month after Nancy was reported missing, Savannah came back to Tucson and stood at the memorial outside her mother's home with Annie and with Tommaso. Nancy Grace watched the footage and concluded that Savannah putting her arm around Tommaso meant she does not believe Tommaso is responsible. That red is credible. Savannah held him. She pulled him close in a moment she knew the world was watching. But Nancy Grace stopped one question short. If Savannah does not suspect Tommaso, who does she suspect? Watch not just who Savannah holds. Watch the space between her and the sister whose car is still in evidence, whose neighborhood federal investigators keep returning to, whose dinner table was the last confirmed location of Nancy Guthrie's freedom. 2 sisters, 31 days of shared loss. And the distance between them at that memorial does not look like the distance between 2 people carrying identical grief from the same position of innocence. On February 7th, Savannah opened the family's video statement with 8 words chosen under conditions of extraordinary pressure by a trained legal and investigative team. We received your message and we understand. Not we are aware communications have been sent. Received, directly, specifically, and understand, not believe, not hope. A verb that implies active comprehension of something complex. And something that once you had the context made sense in a way a note from an unknown stranger would not. Watch Annie's face in that moment when Savannah says the word understand. Watch whether it lands like new information or like something she has already been sitting with. 7 details, all confirmed, all pointing in the same direction. The DNA recovered from inside NY's home has no match in the National Criminal Database. Genetic genealogy is running now. The Celebrite data has been extracted. The car has been processed and not returned. And Sheriff Nanos, 7 weeks in with no arrest, still said his team is definitely closer. A sheriff who says that in a case this visible knows what he is saying will be held against him if it proves false. He chose that word deliberately. Savannah said on February 15th, "You are not lost or alone, and it is never too late to do the right thing." That is not how you speak to a stranger. That is how you speak to someone whose emotional state you understand. Someone whose path to a door you can see clearly enough to believe it still exists. She offered a way out to a person she believes can still hear it. And she only does that if she knows something about the world that person came from. If you know anything, call 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. Her pacemaker went silent at 2:28 in the morning. Her medication was left behind, and that family is still waiting.